on Facebook, and we'll get going. Thank you everyone for joining us. I see so many familiar names. Sadly, I can't see your faces, but lots of familiar names in the attendees. Really excited to have everyone here with us tonight.
Great. All right, Roxana, I would say we're good to go.
Okay. Again, welcome everyone. Good evening. So excited to be here with all of you tonight and to celebrate the launch of a new report named Emergent Multilingual Students, Our Rising Voices, A Call to Action. My name is Roxana Neruzzi. I know many of you I don't, but I'm the Deputy Director for OneAmerica. And OneAmerica is a statewide immigrant advocacy organization, and we are one of the key partners who collaborated to develop this report. I've had the amazing honor of leading a lot of organizing, policy, and movement work, along with many of my colleagues here today, to expand multilingual opportunities in our state. The report, Our Rising Voices, has been the culmination of over a year of work led by staff at OneAmerica, staff at the Community Center for Education Results, and the Roadmap ELL work group. All of these folks have been consistently committed to supporting our systems to receive the strengths of multilingual learners, what some might know as more commonly referred to as English language learners. We want to start tonight by extending a huge thank you to everyone who has helped make this report possible. Many of these folks are here tonight, but there were hours and hours of work, data analysis, and consultation that went into writing this report and highlighting the unique experiences of multilingual learners and centering these students' strengths and assets. So thank you so much to everybody. Before we start our program, I want to begin with acknowledging the Indigenous land that we all stand on. We are gathered here on the traditional lands of the Duwamish people, as well as the South King County tribes of the Puyallup, Nisqually, and Squaxin peoples as well. As part of our advocacy around language access and cultural identity for immigrant and refugee communities, we stand in solidarity with Native communities and recognize the long history of erasure and silencing that has harmed Indigenous communities here in the US. Part of our work and the recommendations that we'll talk about in this report strive to establish stronger partnerships with Native education leaders to support Indigenous language preservation and revitalization. And stay tuned for a future report specific to the educational priorities of Native communities in Washington State, led by our partners, the Headwater Consulting Group, that speaks directly to recommendations for Native students. So tonight we have a wonderful evening planned where we will hear from leaders at the Office of Superintendent for Public Instruction. We also have an incredible panel of education leaders and legislators to highlight various aspects of the report. And then we'll close our event with a call to action and turning it over to all of you around what you can do to support our movement and the recommendations. Please note that the report, which was launched today, it's live, can be viewed currently. We're going to drop a link for the report in the chat. Please share it widely. There's so much richness that we'll go through in the report, but help us get the word out, share it with your networks, and feel free to post it on your social media as well so we get as much traction around the report as possible. We'll also go ahead and email that report out to all attendees that are here with us tonight. Great, so now on to our first speaker. I am so honored and thrilled to introduce Veronica Gallardo, who is here with us tonight. Veronica has recently stepped into a brand new role at OSPI as the Assistant Superintendent of Schools and Systems Improvement. Today she's with us. She will share how OSPI is advancing a vision for multilingualism, as well as Superintendent Reichdahl's commitment to supporting emergent multilingual students. Veronica was previously the Director of Migrant Bilingual Education at Seattle Public Schools, as well as the Director of K-12 programs for the City of Seattle. Veronica's role in our movement is particularly special because she is one of the original members of the ELL work group, a group that started about 10 years ago as part of the collective impact work of the Roadmap Project, as well as the former board president of OneAmerica. Veronica, thank you for joining us today and welcome.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It is a great day indeed to be here to help open up this amazing and momentous occasion. So thank you. I do want to emphasize that along with all those titles, I was also a teacher and a principal, which does provide some background information really necessary to do this type of work. And it's just been a great experience all throughout, working with colleagues from OneAmerica, CCER. And so to be able to tie in this important work with the work I do now at OSPI is incredibly meaningful and a real great opportunity today to share with you. So I am going to share my PowerPoint. And I wanted to make sure that, can you all see that? Great. I wanted to make sure that you all, hold on. It's not moving. Interesting. Give me just 1 minute here. I'm having technical issues, which I've had all day. There we go. Okay. So we have the beauty of OSPI, and having only really worked at OSPI for just over a year and a half, is that when I came in, we already had our vision and mission and values. And the beauty of the vision and mission and values that align with the work of OneAmerica, and particularly for our diverse student population that we serve, is the understanding that we are transforming K-12 education into a system that is centered on closing the opportunity gaps. And when we often refer to the opportunity gaps, it is those who are farthest removed from opportunities within a school setting. So we want to make sure that we're ensuring equity, collaboration, and services, achieving excellence through continuous improvement, which is now more meaningful for me because this is my new role, and focusing on the whole child. The equally important piece here is our equity statement. As you can see, I'm not going to read this all to you, but ensuring educational equity really calls out English language learners here, and the fact that we are talking about going beyond equality, right? And really focusing on our highest needs population, that we're shifting our language with asset-based approaches and so on. So very meaningful alignment with the work of that we're talking about today. So should you ever need direct contact with folks at OSPI in the bilingual and migrant team, this is yours and you'll have access to this today. This is our bilingual team and our migrant team. And today you'll learn a little bit more about the beauty of our migrant team as well. So our objectives, as we walk through this today, I want to make sure that you walk away with the importance of OneAmerica, CCER, and the Roadmap Project. Why is it so important and why is it so meaningful? And I'll give you personal experiences across my working systems. Learn how this aligns with what we're currently doing, and then some meaningful updates that I feel quite strongly have been an impact as a result of the roadmap work I've done for years. So let's begin with the Roadmap Project report and why. Why is it that it's priority work, right? It focuses on positive identity in primary language, diversifying the teacher workforce, because we want a population of teachers that reflects our student population. We want them to have relationships that our students can relate with, right, and folks and understand. We want them to speak the same languages our students speak. And then post-secondary success. And why is this report such a vital resource? Again, speaking from personal experience as a principal, a director, and now an assistant superintendent, it is the basic fact that the data makes the need for this work undeniable. There is no question when you read this report that there is absolutely, this has to be the core of our work and what we do across systems. It's a source that speaks to unjust systems that continues to be in practice, right? So as I begin to work as an assistant superintendent at OSPI, I have that lens of unjust systems. This report brings it alive, it speaks to it, and it helps us really begin to have meaningful conversations about dismantling them, right? The priority work areas are focused on systems change with action steps. So that is a critical piece, because when we talk about change and we're talking about such a large state, it has to be through systems. And then it's a source across the state for district administrators to use as a leverage. I don't know how many times Roxana, Will, and I were on the phone, and I was like, I'm going in front of the school board. I need help here. Help me leverage the report, help me leverage the work of the roadmap group. And we've had some meaningful change in Seattle Public Schools with translation and interpretation, which was not a funded source. It now is. We've had a lot of change with how we design and work with our general education teachers with professional development, just to name a few. So here's some short, quick fun facts. I call them fun facts about Washington State and our language learners. So you can see them at a larger level, right? Across the entire state. We have over 134,000 students that are English language learners in the state of Washington. We're number 7 in the nation for the largest population of English language learners. We are number 2 in the nation for migrant students, our migratory youth. So really exciting data that just really elevates the importance and the value and the needs of the work that the Roadmap Project does and that this report elevates. I'm going quick because we have a lot to do. Shifts in practice at OSPI as a result of some of the work across the roadmap. We have partnered endlessly with OneAmerica on dual language. And so we have been very successful in the development and increase of our dual language programs across the state. And that has been a true partnership. We've changed our language around asset-based instruction. We want to make sure that when we talk about dual language, when we talk about our emergent multilingual students, that it is an asset. Our students bring to us assets. And we focus on closing opportunity gaps and achievement gaps. So this is our superintendent. One of his 6 top priorities is dual language development. And we have funding behind it, which is critical. And we've now increased to state tribal education compact schools as well. So lots of great work, as you can see right here, that is expanding as a result of some of the research and the data that OneAmerica, CCER, and the roadmap work folks do. And the last one, I'm going to end right here because I know I'm going to go over time a bit. In my work across the state and in Seattle Public Schools and with Roadmap, I knew that I wanted to shift the way we look at compliance. I didn't solely want to focus on compliance at OSPI. So instead, we flipped the script, if you will, and we decided to make it a civil rights obligation that districts had. So while we still we have some understanding and focus on compliance, we message it around civil rights obligations. Our students have to be included. They have to have equitable supports and resources to support them. And I'm a firm believer that a lot of my thinking, the mindset has come from all this work with the roadmap, with the report, the data that is so meaningful, and CCER. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop there because I can go on forever.
Veronica, thank you so much. Thanks for that briefing and letting us know all the great work that's underway at OSPI, as well as I just want to share a really heartfelt thank you with you and say how amazing it's been to work with, for many of us to have the opportunity to work with you and see your leadership go from a district to an advocate to the city and now to a really important state institution. So I know that you're carrying so many of our voices and our community's voices in the work you do every day. So thank you again. Thanks for being here with us. We'll get to hear a little bit more from you when we move to the panel. But now let's turn our attention to a few highlights from the report and some of the resources in the report. Again, we'll drop the link to the report in the chat. And Eli, I think we have a slide here. If you want to cue that up for us. Great. So you all can go directly to the report and open it up, but a couple quick snippets and highlights. We don't want to tell you everything because we certainly want you to read it and dig into it. But a couple quick things. One is that, as I mentioned earlier, this report was developed in collaboration between OneAmerica, the Community Center for Education Results, which is the backbone organization of the Roadmap Project, as well as the Roadmap Project English Language Learner Work Group that has been working together for about a decade now and moving priorities for emergent multilingual students and really centering their work in the assets and strengths that our diverse students bring into the school system and focusing on systems level change versus just student outcomes. And then also another major contributor to the report was OneAmerica's Youth Council. We have a number of youth, high school youth who have given their experiences and their voice to this report as well. So we thank everyone who has been a big part of that. One piece of this report is a deep dive into the demographics of South King County. South King County is one of the most diverse regions in the world, or in the country, actually. We have over 160 languages spoken in these 7 districts. And we really unpack and dig into that diversity. So we understand that English learners and multilingual, emerging multilingual learners are not a monolith, that they have different experiences and really a lot of rich diversity that if the system doesn't figure out how we capture and build on, it is a loss. It is a loss for our region and it is a loss for our state. We started this report a year ago. I don't think any of us anticipated where we would be a year ago now, but we overlaid some of the unique impacts that we've seen COVID-19 have on the system and integrated that into the report. We've been asked by lawmakers, by many advocates, what are the most important levers for English learners during COVID-19 and during a year of social distance learning. And we included some of those pieces and recommendations in the report. Great. And we also have a deep dive. The focus of this report, one, is really to frame the strengths and assets of emergent multilingual learners, but it's also about doing a deep dive into the data. And we worked really closely with Brian Chu at Community Center for Education Results. He was really key on helping us pull and refine this data so we were telling the right story about emergent multilingual students. But we dig a little bit into the race and ethnicity of the current demographics. Also updated information on the grade span. We know that a lot of our multilingual students are in the younger grades, but we dig into that. And then we also take a look at some systems indicators. What are the percentage of teachers of color and how does that align with the diversity in our region? How many of our teachers in the system actually have bilingual or ELL endorsements, which we know is a best practice and really advances outcomes and advances opportunities for our multilingual students. And then we also take a look at graduation and post-secondary rates and utilize those, and we need to utilize those data points as motivation to do better by our kids and to do better by our communities. So please get your hands on the report, dig in. And also, if you're curious and you want to go even deeper, the Community Center for Education Results has a great data dashboard that you can start to dig into online and learn more. If you're interested in a specific data point, learn more about that. Great. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit now and bring on our panelists. We have several folks with us here today to talk about the report and kind of bring some of the information, the data, and the recommendations in the report to life. So with us today, we have Fenglin Nancy Yi Klein. She's the English Learner Specialist at Seattle Public Schools and also has a role at Seattle University. We also have Elizabeth Armanita. She's an ELL coach in the Seattle School District. Welcome, Elizabeth. We have a longtime advocate and member of the ELL work group, Will Williams, and she's the ELL director for Kent School District. And I am not sure if we're joined by Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self of the 21st Legislative District, but hoping that she'll be able to join us. And she has been a huge champion for multilingual education in Washington State, and hearing from her, from an elected official, what are some of the levers to move our recommendations. So welcome everyone. Again, thank you for being here, and mostly thank you for your commitment. We've also asked our dear friend Veronica Gallardo to stay with us and also participate in the panel. So to start us off, I'd like to ask each of you to share briefly a little bit about your experiences working with emergent multilinguals and why supporting emergent multilingual learners is important to you. Let's start with Veronica, and then we'll go from there.
My work with emergent multilinguals started in the North Shore School District as a teacher who ended up having all the multilingual learners in a classroom setting by default. And it was an experience that really prompted the need for me to do more deep learning. Then it was in leadership beyond that. And the importance of this role is personal, in that I take great pride in being the daughter of a migrant farm worker in Eastern Washington, Yakima Valley. And I grew up in a multilingual home and was able to really understand the impacts and the barriers in place, not only for myself, but for my family members, cousins throughout the state of Washington. And so it's personal in that I have a deep desire to be an advocate and create systems of change for our language learners.
Great, thank you, Veronica. Nancy, can we ask you to share your perspective next?
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, so for me, as a first generation immigrant, I'm the only E-family member here. So as a personal language learner, just knowing how important it is to be able to have access, to a successful future. I started teaching actually in China, but here I am. I've taught in different school districts. I also coached at the district level, and I'm also teaching some of the university classes in actually ELL endorsement. So I'm super passionate about language education. I believe every of our multilingual learners should have the ability and the opportunities to be successful. So I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you, Nancy. How about Elizabeth?
Hi, this is like for Nancy and Veronica, this is a personal journey for me and a personal commitment. Supporting emergent multilinguals has been my work and my passion for many years. I was a teacher actually first as an IA with the Seattle Public Schools many years ago, and worked with bilingual students, what we call them. And I taught for about 20 years and then became a coach and continued the work with teachers in supporting English learners. I continue to do that. And supporting them is important because it means that we'll have a more inclusive and richer culture and experiences for me and my family, an immigrant family, and for other people like me. And in our country, we will do well to center and elevate assets that our emergent multilingual students and their families bring to our society. We'll just be richer for it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth, and for centering us in how much our own lived experiences and our personal stories drive our passion and our dedication to this work. I think we all share a lot of that. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Will, how about you?
I'll just add that this has been a lifelong passion, a call to action and a call to advocacy for me. And I feel so fortunate to be in the company of all of these amazing colleagues and friends and to be doing the work. I am an action-oriented person, and whatever it takes to get the job done, I will do it. And I'm so energized by this work and by the thought that we are moving toward equity for emergent multilingual students. It's amazing.
Yes, Will, and I can attest to the fact that you are not only a action-oriented person, but an extremely resilient leader who never takes her eyes off the prize and keeps pushing forward. So thank you. Great. So our first question is sharing with us why you see language as important and how you see it tied to cultural identity and student success. Is there somebody who feels inclined to take that question? I know we all have strong feelings about it. Maybe Nancy, if you want to kick us off, and then others can jump in as well.
Absolutely. When I heard that question, there are just so many things happening in my head. Most importantly, I really think all of our, emergent multilinguals need to feel comfortable in their own skin and know that their languages are seen as assets. They should never be hurdles, right? And they should never be expected to be delanguaged and decolored to just learn the, white-centered curriculum, and to be expected to be integrated fully into one way of looking and one way of education. So yes, I'm so excited. Cultural, language and culture, lingua culture, I get excited when I think about those things, right? We need to be able to be 100% healthy, comfortable, and be here 100%.
Yes, thanks, Nancy. I think of this as soul work because when our culture and our identity and our language is ripped away from us, it's like removing a piece of our souls. And I personally had that experience as well. In elementary school, feeling like I wasn't encouraged to speak my home language, and that has had a lot of impacts on me that's taken me a long time to reclaim. So I know a lot of us share that pain, and that's why we pour ourselves into this work. Does anyone else want to share or build on what Nancy said, any of the other panelists, about the relationship between language and cultural identity and student success?
I'll just add that Nancy stated that just beautifully, and I'm not sure there's much we can do to expand on that, but no one should have to check their culture or check their language at the door of the classroom. No one. And we need to affect a paradigm shift across the state in terms of all educators, teachers, administrators, everyone, so that they shift to that asset-based view and erase that deficit-based view that drives a lot of the archaic structures of our system, right? We need to ensure that people are in a position to be empowered and to bring their own power to whatever situation, whether it's the classroom or otherwise.
Well said. Thank you. Thanks, Will, for that, just grounding us. And I couldn't agree more that we should not have to leave who we are at the door to be successful in school. Great. So next question, I'd like to address this first to Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, this report intentionally moves away from using the phrase English language learner and towards a new phrase that many of us in the education field are embracing, emergent multilingual learner. Can you explain why this is an important shift in language?
Yes, without really meaning to, the term ELL is a deficit view of the learners who qualify for English language services. It focuses solely on English as the language being learned without explicit recognition of the student's strengths in other languages. The term emergent multilingual, on the other hand, acknowledges and elevates the value of multilingualism and the gift of languages multilingual students bring with them. Now, these students are acquiring proficiency in more than one language, and English is just one addition to their possibly multiple home or heritage languages. In the Garcia report that we referenced in the Rising Voices report, Garcia, Fleijen, and Falchi, in their research initiative of the Campaign for Educational Equity, use this term because it is strengths-based. It is a strengths-based way to describe students and centers multilingualism as a critical idea in the discussion of equity in the teaching of the students that we serve.
Lots of amens and thumbs up in the chat. Elizabeth, thank you so much. You are just so clear. And I think that even as advocates, we've had to evolve, and we've had to see how sometimes our language can be oppressive and can even center the things that we're working against. And I loved your example of how just the term English learners centers English as the asset and as the priority versus all the other beautiful strengths that we know multilingual learners bring to the space. Great. Does anyone else want to add to what Elizabeth shared, or comment on that question, or talk about language generally and how we talk about English, how we used to talk about English learners, now multilingual, emergent multilinguals?
I'll speak to it at a systems level in that it is, well, first of all, Elizabeth did a beautiful job in really explaining what, how we need to elevate it and shift our language. But shifting our language isn't enough. We really have to do the professional development across the system so that people understand why. And that goes along with the asset-based language as well. So as a system, it will be one of the things that Will and I most likely will lead through our Bilingual Education Advisory Committee, because Will leads that at the state level to begin to make that shift, because it's so powerful in making that shift and then developing professional development to do so.
Thank you, Veronica, for also rooting us in the systems implications, as well as language is important, but it's actually not, it's a part of change, but it isn't change. So we have to do more and take it one step further. Great. So now let's turn our attention a little bit to the actual report and some of the data and some of the new data that is featured. Will, I'd like to ask you if you could share, and you were a major part of designing this report and pouring a lot of your years of expertise in teaching and instruction for multilingual learners into this report. So can you highlight a piece of data or a part of the report that you would want to lift up and really want the audience to hear loud and clear?
Sure. First, I want to echo what Veronica said and what you said earlier. Props to Brian for putting this together. It's amazing. And I hope everybody has your document open, because I would like to call your attention to page 8. Now, it's probably not a piece of data that everyone would choose, but I think it goes nicely with what Veronica just said. We desperately need professional learning for everyone in our state. And to that end, all of our teachers need to be well-grounded in instructional practices and strategies that meet the needs of emergent multilingual students. Emergent multilingual students are everyone's responsibility. And if you would please just read through Nancy's quote that's on that page above the graph, it really makes a number of salient points in that it is every teacher's responsibility to teach both content and language. And somehow people have gotten the idea over the years that the content area teachers teach some students, and then the EL teacher magically takes the other students, the emergent multilingual students, out in the hallway and does some magical thing because perhaps they're broken and maybe he or she can fix them. And we need, again, like I said earlier, a complete paradigm shift, because multilingual learners are not broken. They have an amazing skill set and an asset that's often well beyond those of monolingual English speakers. And they're being passed over, they're being relegated and segregated still to this day, and it's not okay. So like Veronica said, we're doing a lot of work at the state level and talking with Chris Rakedahl about the importance of making strong statements to ensure that school districts are implementing, that they're following the law, they're following Lau versus Nichols, they're following Castaneda, and they're meeting those letters of the law that are also grounded in best practice that's going to allow these students to really show what they know and can do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for lifting that up. And I have to say, you taught me that. I remember several times you said to me, multilingual students are everyone's responsibility. And that got drilled into me as an advocate very early on and has really influenced the way that I advocate for policy. So thank you for teaching me that. And I think some of the work we've done at the policy level, even with dual language programs, and has really emphasized that everyone in the system needs to be responsible for the experiences and the growth and the learning of multilingual students. Great, okay. So for all of you are educators. I know everyone on the panel has been in a classroom at one point or another in your career. And so much of this work, we can talk about policies and data and systems, but it's really about the stories. It's about the students and the stories. And so I wanted to invite you all to think of a particular story that comes to mind after you read the report and that keeps you inspired to continue to do this work and move some of the recommendations.
All right, I think I'm going to follow Will. You know, I get so energized with this group of folks. Seriously, and I still remember doing this work a few years ago, being in the very first EL work group meeting, you know, going to the CCER function when we were just talking about Speak Your Language campaign, and here we are. I feel the work is happening. Sometimes maybe the pace is not as fast as we would like to be, but it's happening. So to speak from my own experience of, you know, being in the classroom right now with my sixth graders in Seattle, and then to be able to coach teachers at the district level the last few years and working with teachers at the university level teacher prep program, to really see that right from induction, all from the preparation program to the induction to actually in-service PD. It's interesting to navigate these different spaces at times. Even now, I shared with some of you how, you know, during the day I'm in one program, but at night when I'm teaching at the EL endorsement program, when I'm talking about, you know, Lao versus all of these cases, to say it is our responsibility, everybody, we must do this. Yet at times to see how we continue to, in the field, unfortunately continue to run very isolated, segregated programs, to see how, unfortunately, while we continue to push for collaborative teaching, co-teaching, I know, Will, you are doing such a great, just different kinds of projects in Kent. I wish more districts will follow suit, where we are truly working together to provide services, not looking at ELL as a subject. And how do we move that away, right? We are not EL teachers. Well, there's not such a so-called magical content that's called ELL, really. It's the services that we provide. So I'm hoping soon, come back to that whole disconnect that I see at times. I hope we will all work together and to come back to the strong message, Veronica, you mentioned how it needs to happen at systems level, how we really need to see all areas we are working together. I hope that will come true very soon.
Thanks so much, Nancy.
Array
Elizabeth,
of
would you
hope.
like to share?
Yeah. I just follow up with what Nancy was saying, because there is rays of hope. They may be faint sometimes, and they sometimes disappear, but they're there. And at least in Seattle Public Schools, in the elementary program, the push and the focus for serving English learners is really in Tier 1 instruction. And I'm excited with the report because recommendation number 5 talks about the implementation of educational best practices rooted in racial equity in every school and classroom. It's a lever for us coaches in working with classroom teachers and working in schools where we could try and negotiate how English learners are served between EL teachers and bilingual IAs and classroom teachers by really speaking to the point that English learners are Gen Ed students first, and our role in our department is to remove barriers to their learning. So if we can do that, if we can remove barriers to their learning, that's our role as EL teachers, as bilingual IAs, as EL coaches.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Again, we see a theme that multilingual learners are Gen Ed students, and we cannot silo, and we really have to ensure that everyone in the system takes responsibility, and yes, removing those barriers. Thank you. Will, how about you? I know you spent a lot of time in Tukwila and the Tukwila School District and now at Kent. Is there a specific story of a family or a student that comes to mind?
Well, there's about a million, but the one that I was thinking of, and I'm not sure this is totally related to this conversation, but like Nancy mentioned, we have been engaging in collaborative teaching practice for a number of years now. So an EL teacher teaches alongside classroom teacher, content area teacher, and they plan together, and they use the ELPs, they use instructional strategies for ELs to make content comprehensible. And so we wanted to know from kids, how's this going for you? How's this working? And so we did a series of interviews with our collaborative teaching leads, and we have videos of kids in grades 2 through 12. And the second graders were amazing. And we had one group of them, it was 4 boys, and they were talking about how great it is to have 2 teachers to support them. And there was one kid just kind of sitting there chewing on his lip and looking around, and then the interviewer called on him, and one of the other students said, he's still in the silent phase, so it's okay if he chooses not to speak. And that was so powerful to us to hear that, because that metacognition that students are doing about their own learning and their own understanding of acquisition of language was just manifested so beautifully in how those students supported one another. And I just thought, okay, there's one little win right there, right? And that's, I guess, how you have to approach it, right? Is just take those little beautiful little things and really expand on them, and just cause the next beautiful thing to happen. And that was just one that was in my head that stuck out as something that just is really powerful to me in terms of driving me into even more of an advocacy position, right? That to ensure that the conditions for those students to learn are there, and that they have 100% access to everything.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for grounding us in that experience and the stories of the students you've had to work with. And I think, it doesn't do this year justice to say it's been a difficult year, but I think that for many of us, when we're struggling to get up in the morning and keep going. We all face barriers in our jobs, in our lives. we have to center ourselves on who we're working for and the students and the families that really rely on all of us to be strong and to be a voice and to be bold. So thank you. So this is the last question. We're getting close to wrapping up the panel. And I want to give everyone a chance to answer this. So hopefully most of you have been pretty involved in writing, designing, thinking through this report. And for all of our attendees, if you go to the end of the report, there are about 5 main recommendations, and they all have very specific call outs around who has the most impact in making those changes, whether that's principals, teachers, superintendents, the state legislature. So to close, I'd like to invite each of you to take a moment to highlight one recommendation that you think is really important and the impact that, if that recommendation is to come to fruition, what is the impact that it will have on students and schools? So Veronica, let's start with you, and then we'll just go down the list.
It's hard to pick. I will start with one, in that it's the scale up proven anti-racist education strategies, right? Create those welcoming environments that are asset based. And I think one of the critical pieces around that is to, especially in these times where their environment is different, it needs to be focused on the asset approach. It needs to be focused and centered around the student, because we're not only talking about language, we're talking about traumas our students are bringing with them. We're talking about all the other needs that make the student whole, right? So we need to be able to scale up the anti-racist education strategies so that it is centered on the student, and provide that professional development for our teachers so that they could do that.
Thank you, Veronica. Such an important recommendation to highlight. And I know that the folks who worked so hard on this report were really thoughtful about connecting the work and not divorcing the best practices for emergent multilingual students from anti-racist practices and what is really best for all students of color. Great. How about Nancy? How about you? What is a recommendation that you'd like to lift up, and what do you think the impact will be?
I come back to 5. So I'll draw your attention to 5. To implement educational best practices rooted in racial equity for emergent multilingual students in every school and classroom. And some of the action steps here, to push for inclusive education, collaboration between gen ed and EL teachers. We need to really work together. It takes the whole village to raise a child. It takes everybody at all levels. But in classrooms, where we have teachers, we need to make sure that our teachers are properly trained, that they will have that mindset shift, rather than just changing the use of the term EL to emergent multilingual learner. We are actually truly shifting our practices to move beyond just the term change, but the actual shift in our practices.
Thanks, Nancy. Elizabeth, would love to hear from you.
Yes, I'm looking at recommendation number 3, scale up recruitment, hiring, and retention of educators who are racially diverse, culturally responsive, and equipped to educate emerging multilinguals. Part of this is my role too with the UW Seattle Teacher Residency Program, and being an instructor in that program, and we're now coming into cohort 9. There's 25 in each, right? 25 teachers in each cohort who are diverse and who are immersed within their year with us in STR about culturally responsive teaching, about interrogating biases that we have, because sometimes in our best intentions, we all have biases, and we have to really get those in the surface. And in the education of these teachers, scaling that up, the recruitment, and keeping them in the school districts by supporting them, by providing professional development so that they continue to be the teacher that they want to be, that they aspire to be for the students that we serve. I think is what I really want to emphasize.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. I think I saw, at least for the panelists, a lot of nodding heads, but I think so many of us can relate to the experience of never seeing anyone, not only that looks like us, but that we can relate to, that understands our cultural experiences at the front of the classroom, and in everywhere in the school building. And we have to do better, and we have to not only do better in hiring and retention, but also in the pipelines for our people from our community to move into the teaching profession and into the educator profession, because our kids need to see people with our lived experiences as educators. So thank you for highlighting that. And last, again, certainly not least, Will, would love to hear about a recommendation that you would like to leave everyone who's with us here today with.
Well, if you're not already engaging in the dual language work that's going on across the state, jump right in. We got all kinds of things going on. And thanks to OneAmerica for really jumping in early on and, with the advocacy and the policy work at the state level. Those of us who've been around for a while know that we've always been required to implement dual language, but until we had a push statewide to really bring that to fruition so that people really understood that this is the gap closing model, it's the model that doesn't produce a gap in the first place, then people are jumping on board and people are really excited about it. And we need to approach it from all facets in terms of recruiting our emergent multilingual students right out of high school to become teachers, looking for curricular resources, establishing partnerships with community groups. I mean, all of these things. Every school needs to be a DL school, and we need to just keep working on that until it happens.
Thank you so much, Will. Truly your vision and the vision of so many others that are part of this community that pushed OneAmerica to lead on this issue and believe that we could get to a place where every school could be a dual language school is part of what has gotten to us to the place we are today. So I promise I didn't pay Will to say that, but it is a beautiful segue to our call to action. But before we do that, please everyone join me in thanking our incredible panelists for such a wonderful discussion. I learned so much, and I truly feel re-centered and re-inspired in my mandate to be an advocate on this issue. And as I know that so many others that are here with us today are as well. So thank you for your effort, your time, your commitment, your energy, and mostly for your leadership. Great. So we'll go ahead and move into the call for action. Part of the major big piece of this report is that it is a tool to support the advocacy we're all doing. We really designed this report. It's not that it sits on the shelf or that it's just used for data, but that is used for advocacy, not only at the state level, but also within our schools and districts. So I'd like to, again, bring folks' attention to the last few pages. That is where all the recommendations are. And as I mentioned earlier, pinpoints which decision makers have the biggest influence in helping make these recommendations a reality. So tonight, our first call to action is to fill out our survey. And we want to know from all of you in this call what you plan to do and how you want to sit down with your colleagues to make a commitment to driving these recommendations to get forward together. Eli, my colleague, is going to go ahead and drop that form in the chat. But getting input from you all and knowing where you're going to put your time and energy will help us build the advocacy community that we're bringing together around the report, and figure out everyone who will, as we say in movement circles, throw down to ensure that emergent multilinguals are in fact received in the system as a strength and an asset. Second major call to action is we are, most of you know this, we are headed into an unprecedented legislative session. It will be the very first time in Washington State's history that the legislature will be meeting remotely online. And this will have a tremendous impact on our advocacy. We know that there just won't be as much time, and there will be a lot of inventing that is happening. So as advocates, we have to prepare ourselves, and that is what makes your support and involvement even more crucial. So for the past few years, OneAmerica has been involved in, as Will was saying, in driving a piece of legislation focused on dual language education. And we had a vision early on that with the right supports and startup funds, more districts across the state could and should have dual language programs. So we have built on that for years and years. We've gotten a lot of funding through the state legislature. We passed one of the first bills that was focused on dual language, expanding dual language across the state. As Veronica talked about earlier, Superintendent Reichdahl made it one of his core commitments to move a 10-year vision to have a fully bilingual state. And I'm so proud of the work that many of us, including so many of you that are here who are here with us today, have come together and led. And this year we have another opportunity, we have another bite at the apple to continue to build our movement and expand the opportunities, not only for dual language classrooms, but hopefully also opportunities for Indigenous and heritage languages, because everyone, whether they speak Farsi, Somali, Khmer, should be able to be invested in speaking their home language. And we want to build that into the system. And then finally, another major piece of the bill is language access. So we had a bill that was passed a few years ago, thanks to the work of so many advocates, and a task force came together that OSPI convened, and a set of recommendations was a year-long body of work, set of recommendations around how our state and how our schools and districts can be better about interpretation and translation for communities and families. And that is more important now than ever in a time of online learning, and when parents are even more responsible for their children's learning and education than they ever have been. So I invite you again to please fill out that form. We want all of your contact info. We want to loop you into the advocacy network, and we need each and every one of your voices to help us win on these issues. And we're also excited to continue our partnership with the Native community and build in some pieces around Indigenous language revitalization into our work around dual language, as we've done in the past, and continue to build on that. So we will be advocating for legislation. We'll be fighting to protect so many things that impact our communities in the budget. And that is only possible if we all come together and if you all raise your voices and continue to be bold and be unapologetic around what our communities need. So with that, we are at the end of our program. I want to extend again a very heartfelt thank you to our great panelists, to Veronica at OSPI for her leadership, and to all the wonderful, amazing staff from OneAmerica, CCER, and other organizations who came together to put this report together. I am so strong in my conviction that we will use this report to advance the priorities for emergent multilingual learners and be relentless in our pursuit for what our communities need and deserve. This really is an opportunity to come together. We need you in 2021. So if you have other ideas about how we expand and pump up the advocacy network, we're all ears. But until then, let's continue to advocate for the educational system our multilingual learners deserve in order to thrive. Thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good night.